I now would want to call on our own deputy principal and former head of the CGDS for the past 15 years, whom I acknowledged in her absence, Professor Rhoda Reddock. We're going to ask Professor Reddock to coordinate the panel discussion, and I'll ask the panelists to come forward and take their seats. We're now in that part of the program. Professor Reddock, will you take the chair and lead us through the panel discussion?
Aims to reflect on the contribution of the Women and Development Studies group. Now, it's quite fitting that as we mark the Center's 15th anniversary, that we recognize the work of the Women and Development Studies group. And I'm sure that when the history of the Center for Gender and Development Studies is written, the contribution of the group must be an important part of this history. The group, as it is fondly called, was formed in March 1982. I was then a graduate student and was invited by Peggy Antrobus, then tutor coordinator of WAND, which is the Women and Development Unit of the Extramural Department of the UWI, to prepare a position paper on the establishment of a program in Women and Development Studies at the UWI. Jocelyn Messiah, who had just completed the Caribbean Research Project, chaired that meeting, and participants included Marjorie Thorpe, at that time visiting the Mona campus, Marjorie Hamilton, and others. It was at this meeting that the decision was made to establish the Women and Development Studies groups with branches on each campus. Marjorie was the first coordinator, but the group was chaired by Gwendolyn Williams until Marjorie returned to Jamaica. Group membership comprised academic and ATSS staff, but also students, women, and a few men. And I just wanted to mention 3 of the men who were members of the group. There was Lloyd Braffett, the former campus principal and professor of sociology. There was Kenneth Nobby, the current director of the Works Department, and Dr. Hamid of the Faculty of Engineering. Vernite was also a member. So I think that as we, pardon? And David Dolly, who's still a member of the associate staff of the center. And of course, there are many other members, women members, some of whom are here this evening, and some of whom are not. For example, Paula Morgan, there was, pardon me? Yes, there was Annette Knight, and so many others. But I'm sure that when the history is written, everybody will be accounted for, and also when we have our collection in the library, future researchers will get detailed information about our participation. The group was instrumental in lobbying for the establishment of the center, which eventually came into being in 1993, 11 years after the group was established. The group also provided support to women staff at the UWI. For example, it was the Women and Development Studies group that lobbied for women academic staff to join the other staff of the UWI in getting full paid maternity leave. Prior to that, female academic staff got 1 month's full pay and 2 months no pay. Half pay. The group eventually lost its strength. I suppose people grew older, had different interests. But also with the establishment of the Center for Gender and Development Studies, it was felt by some that some of the activities of the group had moved to the center. So in this 15th anniversary celebration, I think it's fitting that we celebrate the contribution of the Women and Development Studies group. Unfortunately, we could not have all the members here, so we have a selection of the members who participated over the years. We have, first of all, Dr. Marjorie Thorpe, Marjorie at the end there, a former senior lecturer and head of the Faculty of what was then Arts and General Studies. She was the first chair of the group and introduced the first gender-related course on the campus, AR 301, Introduction to Women's Studies, which was team taught by about 4 members of staff. We also had have Professor Margaret Rouse Jones, former campus and university librarian, who was a member of the group Under the Tree, as Annette was. And were you too, Grace? The group Under the Tree participated in a workshop in Runaway Bay at Mona, in Jamaica, sorry. I wasn't there. But apparently they met under the tree. And that experience was so enriching that after they returned to Trinidad and Tobago, they continued to meet as group under the tree and spearhead training activities for other members. We also have Professor Bridget Brereton, Professor of History, former Deputy Campus Principal and Interim Campus Principal. And Bridget was a member of the Friendship Counseling and Support Group. This was a group of senior academics who would provide advice to younger academics on personal, academic, and career matters with confidentiality and privacy. And I'm sure we still need such a group today. And other members of that Friendship Counseling and Support Group included Dr. Desiree Wilson and Professor Maureen Kane. And last but not least, we have Denise Williams Dummet. Denise graduated from UWI, St. Augustine, 1976, with a BSc in Agriculture. She left Trinidad and Tobago for Guyana, Ghana, and Jamaica over 15 years, and returned to the campus in 1992 when she joined the Women in Development Studies group in 1993. She worked for 9 years in the Faculty of Agriculture, left in 2001, and returned to the campus in October 2007, and is currently Administrative Assistant at the Sport and Physical Education Center, responsible for academic programs. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce this group and to call on each of them to give some reflections on the group and what it meant for them. Marjorie.
Thank you. Deputy Principal, Professor Rhoda Reddock, Dr. Grace Sirju, Head of the Center for Gender and Development Studies, colleagues, students, friends, advocates. Dale Spender opens her essay, Theorizing About Theorizing, observing, and I'm quoting here, that theories and perspectives do not fall from the air ready-made. There is a danger in telling a tale in retrospect, and it is the danger that everything appears ordered, purposeful, meaningful. She continues, if now, for the sake of convenience and comprehension, I reconstruct some of the influences and insights of the past in a linear and ordered fashion, it is not because that is the way they were experienced, but because in retrospect, I can impose and project meaning, I can create order of the chaos of everyday experience of the past. And I would like you to bear these observations in mind as I now offer you what is essentially a reconstruction of my experience as the first convener of the Women and Development Studies group at St. Augustine. The background to the establishment of the group has been documented in a March 1993 publication, Women and Development Studies, A Decade of Development, compiled by Althea Kaminjolo. The publication recalls, and I found it a very good document, the publication recalls the pioneering roles played by the Women and Development Unit and the Institute of Social and Economic Research at Cave Hill. It describes the support provided by the Institute of Social Studies at The Hague. It chronicles, too, the early research, teaching, and outreach activities of the St. Augustine group, and it includes a series of interviews with founding members of the group. The interviews serve to remind us that from the outset, the group was multidisciplinary, although there was a strong humanities, social science bias. It was a gathering of female faculty focused on raising the consciousness of the university community and the larger society in respect of the unequal condition of women. And I am not sure that Rhoda referred to a committee of which Bridget was a part that counseled. I don't know if that was there while I was there, because I think initially, certainly, it did not seek to address the individual and private gender challenges of members, although in the process, we gained insight into more personal concerns. Finally, we had come to women's studies along different paths and with somewhat different priorities, so that we could not hope to avoid the tensions inherent in any grouping, particularly one that seeks to be inclusive. Sisterhood may be powerful, but it isn't always easy. The Women's Studies Project owes much of its initial success to the quality of the early leadership. In a situation where one is trying to disrupt or subvert centuries-old traditions and approaches, the reputation, the credentials, and the positions which advocates command in the institutional structure are particularly critical. Lucille Mathurin-Mayer, who served as the first regional coordinator of the Women and Development Studies groups, enjoyed the friendship and respect of the UB hierarchy. She was a former member of the Mona administration, and she had subsequently distinguished herself within the United Nations system, serving first as Secretary General to the UN Mid-Decade Conference on Women held in Copenhagen in 1980, and then as Secretary General to the UN Conference on the Question of Palestine held in Geneva in 1983. Her research included a historical study of women in Jamaica, 1655 to 1844, and a publication on the rebel woman in the British West Indies during slavery. Lucille's international reputation, her scholarship, and her contacts within the UE made her an invaluable asset. Additionally, WAN's Peggy Antrobus and the ISCR's Jocelyn Messiah had also made their mark within and beyond the university community, so that the involvement of these women made it difficult for even the most determined detractors and skeptics to defend the assertion that in trying to launch women's studies, we were really being faddish, that this was just another example of West Indians, and in this case, West Indian women, aping what was going on in the United States and Britain. I think, too, the fact that as a group we were neither strident nor combative in our interactions with the university community meant that we did not arouse active hostility. A couple of male faculty interested in the new feminist perspective even presented papers at our in-house lunchtime seminars. And even more to the point, we at St. Augustine had the support of senior male academics like Lloyd Braff and James Millett. Finally, the group benefited immeasurably from links with Women Working for Social Progress and other partners in the NGO community at the national, regional, and international levels. These links from the outset helped to keep us alert to the pivotal roles of women in the ongoing development process, to the various and complex ways in which women both contribute to and benefit from that process. When the Women and Development Studies Group was established in 1982, the women's movement was some 20 years old, and women's studies had been part of the US experience for more than a decade. Since 1975, too, the issue of gender equity and the need to correct the social injustices to which women the world over remained subjected assumed a higher priority on the world stage. In academia, however, the autonomy integration debate continued to exercise the minds of those involved in the development of women's studies in higher education. The debate is summarized in the introductory chapters of Theories of Women's Studies, edited by Bowles and Klein. Advocates of the two approaches were agreed that women's studies is an educational strategy to induce change in a sexist world. Consequently, a first step must be the revision of the curriculum. But how was this to be achieved? Those in support of a separate entity saw women's studies as a place in the university where radical women-centered scholarship could grow, develop, and expand. Women's studies courses would provide the breadth and depth not possible in mainstream offerings. Conservationists, on the other hand, argued that an autonomous entity would reaffirm the marginality of women's studies, turning it into an enclave for special interests that could be easily starved for funding. In a perverse way, too, it would relieve teachers in the mainline courses from the obligation to deal with women's issues. At St. Augustine, material realities dictated the initial approach. The first women's studies course offered at St. Augustine, and I think the first offered at UE, was located in what was then called the Faculty of Arts and General Studies. There was no funding to support the hiring of women's studies faculty or support staff. The traditional disciplines were arguing that they were themselves in need of an expanded body of lecturers. The Women's Studies group then had two tasks. One, to secure the offices of lecturers within the system, and to develop a course that would be approved by academic board. Members of the Women's Studies group were already engaged full-time in the work of their respective departments. It was agreed that the first course, an introduction to women's studies, would be a type of communal effort, multidisciplinary in character, at once exposing students to ways in which a feminist perspective fosters a more balanced, inclusive structure of knowledge, and avoiding the pitfall of token additions to the traditional curriculum. The faculty office, with some support from their departmental colleagues, produced book lists, handouts, and fulfilled other related functions. But, as critics of the integrated approach have noted, it was another example of women taking on a double burden of remaining expert in the old men's studies, mastering and applying the new feminist ideas and approaches. I can only surmise that the excitement and the research opportunities generated by the new discipline were an effective palliative. Certainly for me, the introduction of the first Women's Studies course, AR 301, was the high point in my tenure as coordinator of Women and Development Studies, of the Women and Development Studies group. I left UE in 1989. The time spent with the group remains one of the most professionally enriching periods of my career, and one that has greatly influenced my personal growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marjorie. And now, Margaret Rouse-Jones.
Thank you very much, Rhoda, Deputy Principal, Professor Rhoda Reddock, Dr. Grace Sirju-Charran, Head of the Center for Gender and Development Studies, fellow panelists, UE colleagues, students, specially invited guests, all protocols observed. Good evening. I was asked to bring a perspective from the library and to address the question of how the library's input to the Women and Development Studies group contribute to the establishment of the Center for Gender and Development Studies. Rhoda mentioned the group under the tree, which was later, because that was post-1990, and I'll mention a little bit about that. But what I want to say is that from the inception of the group in 1982, librarians were among those who participated actively. Marjorie will remember this. There was Yulin Blondell, there was Annette Knight, and there was myself later. There was Sandra Barnes, and Claudia came in later. And then we had people, we had even ATS staff, Carol Polliner, Jean Trestrel. Their names are all in the record. Right, yes. Lutishaw Salisbury, right? So the librarians have always were part of the group initially. Now, one might well ask, well, why? Why did librarians, the whole woman issue studies was seen as a scholarly, but the point is apart from the fact that the library profession is dominated by women, the librarians at UWI always understood the need for collaboration between teaching, learning, and research arms of the academy and the library and information services. This understanding, collaboration, 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 has really been our mantra. And one of the things it has always led us to do is to present ourselves at the table and be involved in all discussions related to the establishment of programs, the content of teaching and research, right? And because if we aren't invited, we say, look, you forgot us, we're coming, kind of thing, right? So the Women and Development Studies group was quite open, and so the librarians went along and actively participated. I did a bit of, research historian that I am, and noted that there were these early seminars. I think Grace mentioned them, the Gender in Caribbean Development, which was held in September 1986. And 5 librarians participated in that, 3 from UE and 2 others. And that was a 2-week seminar. We drove up to Mount St. Benedict every morning. I mean, I had never driven up to the Mount before. But now, I mean, there I have no fear of driving to the Mount anymore because, I was a relatively new driver in those days. So, but at the end of the seminar, we formed a documentation working group, the librarians, and compiled a guide to resources in women's studies in the Caribbean. It was a lot of hard work, I remembered. And this guide listed the bibliographies, the directories, the indexes, the periodicals, the audiovisual resources, distributors, organizations, and we included the subject headings and the call numbers where the materials could be found in the library. And then 2 years later, before that, what I wanted to say was, I think what was significant for the librarians in attending that seminar is that it broadened our own knowledge base and heightened our awareness in the area of collection development. A lot of the theoretical underpinnings, that was a phrase we learned. We came to a better understanding of them as librarians, and so we were able to approach the whole collection development issues, much more judiciously. Then 2 years later, there was another disciplinary seminar, Gender Issues in the Humanities. And at that seminar, 3 librarians presented papers which highlighted the documentation issues and the role of the librarians in the group. The late Kay Crookendale, she was on the staff at K-Phil at the time, and I did not even remember this. It was only preparing this talk I saw that Kay, she presented a paper, and in it she talked about the fact that despite the fact that librarians have the expertise in the area of information retrieval, librarians as well as other researchers entering the domain of women's studies had to come to terms with the relative newness of the field and the range of ideas and theories presented. On the other hand, the bibliographic systems, especially those in the developing world, adjust more slowly, and thus librarians had to be creative and to adapt the traditional skills and approaches in meeting the needs of the users. Crookendale also made the point that because the area of women's studies involves scholarly investigation as well as activism, there was an onus on information providers to be proactive in collecting activist literature. This was something that, could be overlooked. In library terms, gray literature, the odd pamphlet put out here, the posters and those kinds of things. But we know from experience that, and Bridget would know this, that they are source material for social studies in its broadest sense. So one of the things that came out of the discussion was that we had to be aware to be proactive in collecting this kind of material, because this gray literature, as I've said, is really outside of the traditional bibliographic tools. I mean, it's not listed in a bibliography anywhere, and no supplier is selling it in any case. You had to have a really aggressive acquisitions policy taking into consideration all these things. Kathy Shepherd, who is another librarian in the group, reinforced the point that much of the literature appeared in journal and conference proceedings. And in the Caribbean context, the availability of materials could present a challenge. I mean, we know how it is. Just to give you a little example, you know, the conference takes place, the papers come out, maybe they're never published, maybe you didn't get a copy of all, and then 2-3 years later, some user is looking for a paper, which there was that paper, that conference, and and the librarian has to produce it. Well, we have to like take in front, as my mother would say, and be proactive in following up, you know, at the time that the conference is happening, you know, tracking down the papers and making sure that the library has all of them. In addition to this was the fact that many non-print sources were now becoming, you know, more prominent and required for teaching and research. Photographs, recorded interviews, Pat mentioned some of these, and other multimedia resources. And the consequence of this, of course, that we had to broaden our acquisition policies to ensure that these materials were included. And a third viewpoint, which was presented at that conference, and this was in a paper that I had done, looking at sources for the study of women in Caribbean history. It reinforced the point that Kathy had made, but also revealed that the information was scattered through the disciplines in demography and sociology and ethnography and sociolinguistics. And this had implications, you know, for catalogers, even for the classification of material, you know, which is really the purview of the librarian. In the discussion which accompanied the bibliography that I had prepared, I also pointed to the fact, and this was something, you know, that I kind of really looked at and realized was so, is that a lot of the existing work, and I was thinking of something like Orlando Patterson's Sociology of Slavery, you know, the women were in there, but to use the phrase, they were hidden. They were hidden from history. And sometimes they weren't even mentioned in the indexes to the works and things like that. And one of the things that we were suggested in that paper is that you needed to even go back to some of these works, but with a fresh eye, you know, with this new awareness, this new understanding that you have to look at the literature differently to find exactly what you want. Now, the participation, I just thought I'd mention this, of librarians in the group in the early days was mutually beneficial. In the process of meeting the needs of the group to support teaching, learning, and research, librarians were at the same time developing their own scholarship profiles and thus positioning themselves to advance in the career path. And this has always been an issue for us as librarians. So the group, you know, helped us in that way. Annette, for example, she was one of the early members. She did a bibliography which was published by the group, a Women's Studies Select Bibliography, with a third world emphasis, because she developed this in response to the realization that existing bibliographies published on both sides of the Atlantic concentrated mainly on the US and on the metropole. So she did a bibliography concentrating on women and their place in society in third world countries. And then Claudia Defoe, she joined the group much later, but she also worked closely with Gwen Williams in doing a solid piece of work on gender and management case studies for the Caribbean. And as part of that, she did an extensive literature review and bibliography on women in management and women in general. Now, from the above discussion, and I'm kind of rushing, it is evident that librarians were significant in ensuring that by the time the center was developed, the information support for teaching, learning, and research was well in place. Our involvement and awareness also resulted in judicious management of the budgetary allocations for the center. I mean, there were some times when money was tight, you know, and so we had to, our knowledge of the subject and, you know, what was coming out helped us to make wise decisions as to how the budgets would be spent. We were also involved with editing the early reports and that reader that Pat mentioned. In fact, I'm clearing out my study recently, and I came upon a letter from you talking about that, right? And yes. And we have continued to be involved with the development of the center. Librarians continue to be involved, included as members of the board, and we're in constant collaboration with the teaching faculty in the development of resources, including the oral resources. Again, Pat mentioned these have become important. I know we included copies of all your research work in the library's oral history program. And again, you know, we have now the awareness of developing the oral resources in that way. Now, I just wanted to mention yes, I'm winding up. I just wanted to mention the group under the tree came out of a workshop that was held in Mona. It was in 1990. The workshop ended on July 27, 1990. There were many things that happened that those of us who were at that workshop, I mean, we were never the same. But you know, recently I was at a conference and this person came up to me and she said, I was at that workshop. And the thing about it, it was a workshop that was intended to prepare us for higher management. And I mean, it really did that. And when we look at some of us who attended, you know, it really accomplished what it did. And I mean, really, there were bonds that were forged due to the experiences that we have. I mean, Grace will remember. We were never the same, but it was something that really, I think, impacted on us. So in closing, what I would just like to say is to know that what we did, what the librarians did for the Center for Gender and Development Studies, I think we do for all programs. But in the case of the center, the Women and Development Studies group represented the womb. I mean, Rhoda was saying just now, she did, you know, it fizzled out. But the way I thought about it, I said the group, the Women and Development Studies group, was like the womb in which the center grew and was birthed. So that the librarians and, you know, all the early people, we were like part of the placenta, let's put it that way. And so we feel a great sense of involvement, you know. I mean, and so on that note, I really want to congratulate the center on having accomplished this milestone and to wish the head continued success. And of course, the collaboration with the librarians continue.
Thank you very much for that, Margaret. And I was just looking at this list here, and I think 4 out of the publications here, each of them includes a librarian. Yeah. So I think your point is well made. That's Denise Dummet.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very humbled by the invitation to speak about my personal experiences and to sit with the deputy principal and the head of the center. And welcome to everybody. I recognize my fellow panelists and old friends in the audience, in particular. Grace. Grace knows me as a student here on the campus when she was a demonstrator. Professor Yusuf. I'm not going to say anything about how long Professor Yusuf knows me, but I studied livestock and agriculture, and he taught animal nutrition, so he knows me quite well. So I've been around a long time and then left the campus to take off for a sojourn of about 15 years. So when I joined the group in 1993, I did come armed with some perspectives of my own. And if I could categorize them, I think they were mostly rural perspectives. I hadn't been traipsing around the world in the metropolitan areas only. But I worked and lived in those areas and worked and lived among people. I wasn't in a luxurious camp or anything of the sort. And in that way, I think I was very privileged. Certainly in Guyana, seeing the role of women, which, to put it in a phrase, I would say were almost like baggage carriers, as they fetched all the load and the men walked behind, empty-handed, to hunt. And then moving on to Ghana, where I, myself, on the positive side, adopted some of the things that I saw the women doing, which I thought were extremely practical. simple things like potty training and the way they carried their women on their back, their babies, so you had your hands free, really makes a lot of sense. So I adapted a single sheet and did just that with my son, who's now 26 years old. But again, bit of regret when you go to, we were privileged because as expats, the other expats were not invited to dinner at Ghanaians' houses, but we were. And because of it, I saw that the person who would invite us, his wife did not sit at the table with us. She sat at the back step until she was called. And that was surprising for me, considering that both of them had been abroad, they had worked abroad, and I thought they were more exposed than, you know, the normal sort of Ghanaian. I spent 4 years in Guyana, 4 in Ghana, and then wanting to return to the Caribbean, wanting to farm in a very practical way. Could not afford in the 80s to buy the little square of land that was being sold in Trinidad for $1 million in those days. Went to Jamaica, where I had lots of friends and family as well at the time, just for a short time, and had a 32-acre farm. So I was walking the talk. I know what it is to farm. I didn't do it as a hobby. I did it as a main source of income. But again, being placed in a rural area because of the farming, Clarendon, in the parish of Clarendon, I saw so many women there where, if I could just take my neighbor as an example, who, I mean, childbirth was almost something they did so very easily. Going to the neighbor's house and calling her daughter and saying, "Can I speak with your mommy?" And she just turns and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, mommy says she's a little busy right now having the baby, and could you come back later?" And they did everything themselves right there without any sort of pre or postnatal care. What I noticed as well, of course, was that in the line of children, you know, if you had 8 children, you realize that the first 3 always had good growth rates. You could see it in their skin and the rate of growth. The next 3 or 4 would be sort of stunted, and you would certainly see the beginnings of malnutrition, the hair changing, etc. But both in Ghana and in Jamaica, I noted that the thing was you could always call the children and offer them food at any time of the day or night. They never refused it, never refused it. In Ghana, what amazed me was what little people existed on just for their basic needs, but they still had enough, and it was very humbling that they still had enough at the end of the harvest to share, because we were strangers, and strangers must always be welcomed, and you didn't dare refuse. That would be an insult of the highest order. Okay, so I came down with that back to the university, full circle, which was my first job in Trinidad. I had worked everywhere else, left as a student, and now I was back in my very first job at the university. So it was a bit of coming back home and a familiar environment for me. But by then, I was now separated from my husband and feeling very much alone, never seeing yourself in that role. And the Women and Development Studies really provided a source of support for me. I was happy to be able to participate in the various workshops, and one run by Grace Talma really, really stands out. I have to tell you, I still have that folder. Even though I've moved about 5 times, I still have that folder somewhere. I saw it recently. An orange folder. I even remember the color of it. And it really, the whole thing boosted, because I had the what would I say, being able to share common problems with other women. I was also able to do that in an academic environment, you know, which made it very real for me. It was my background. Definitely, it's my background. And it gave me a great awareness of the issues that were being fought on the university campus, because I expected more. I expected that certain things would have been done already. I didn't expect that the center would now be fighting for things like childcare services. I just thought that somehow in the 15 years of absence, the university had evolved to that point. And so I was a little surprised, and I was happy to join in the fight. Let me just say as well, I really didn't consider myself a good member. I don't think I attended as many meetings as I should have, but certainly the workshops that I did attend really helped me, it inspired me, and it was a real source of support. If I may say that we seem to, as women, we've documented so well the negative role models. I wouldn't say the negative role models, let me change that, the negative experiences. And this is the example of this, that we've documented this so well, and the story of this woman, Estella, and what has happened to her. I would like to see a little bit more balance in we documenting some of the positive experiences that have happened, and maybe the fact that there may be males that have acted that role as protector of women. My role model in life is my father. He protected his mother from abuse, he protected his sister from abuse, and he had the forethought to provide for me financially, just in case something happened. So before he left this earth, he made absolutely sure, and this is someone who never finished secondary school, that every single I was dotted and T was crossed in his matters, so that I would be able to enjoy some sort of financial independence. So maybe out there are men who have learned and who have not continued the cycle of abuse because he was abused. I would get very emotional if I was to tell you the stories that my aunts told me after he died. He never took that out on us, he never told us about it, but he suffered greatly. But he decided he could change things. Maybe we could somehow engender that role as protectors in men, and not only bombard them with the stories of don't abuse, which is a negative, but that men did X, Y, and Z. And here we have a real person who did that, and I'm sure there are many, many more out there. I am always, always so pleased when I see men. It touches my heart that I see men taking their children to school, as simple as that is. So I'm sure there are many more out there. I want to thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for staying.
Okay, before I introduce the final speaker, Professor Bridget Brereton, I just want to acknowledge Dr. Joan Rawlins, who is Senior Lecturer in the Department of Community and Public Health, but also a former coordinator of the Women and Development Studies group.
Friends and colleagues, as Denise said, thank you for staying so long. The advantage of being the last speaker on a panel is that nearly all the important points have been made already, so you'll be glad to know that I'm going to be very, very brief. I'm just going to make maybe 3 or 4 points. First point I want to make is that I am extremely proud that I am a founding member of the Women and Development Studies group. But what I have to tell you is that that nearly did not happen. I nearly did not get the pick or the call from Marjorie, and I'll explain why. She called us together, it must have been October 1982, and just 2 or 3 months earlier that year, I had managed to produce son number 3. And Marjorie said, "Bridget, what are you doing? All you are doing is increasing the size of the opposition." Nevertheless, she relented, and she did pick me. When the group started, Marjorie will remember, it was very, very small. There couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 of us. We used to meet in Marjorie's little office, you remember. And really our first order of business was to educate ourselves. Self-education is the beginning of all education. Marjorie had been exposed to gender issues in literature, but, and of course when Rhoda joined us a bit later, she was a fully fledged gender person. But the rest of us, including myself, had virtually no exposure to gender issues. And so we began literally by educating ourselves with little presentations and seminars and talks. And that was very important. That was the beginning. Marjorie mentioned that one of the key tasks of the group was lobbying and advocacy. And that is absolutely true. What she didn't say, characteristically, was that it was extremely important for us that Marjorie was our coordinator in those early years, because she was a person who who enjoyed considerable clout within the university system. If I'm wrong, Marjorie, I apologize, but were you not the first female dean? Certainly at St. Augustine, if not in the whole system, I can't remember. She was certainly the first female dean at St. Augustine. So the fact that she held, and she had also been a head of department, the fact that she had held or did hold those offices, that she was a recognized member of the campus and university hierarchy was very, very important for us in those early years. Now, she mentioned AR 301 as perhaps the highlight of her achievements as coordinator. Recently, like Margaret, I was doing some clearing out in the office, and I came across all my AR 301 files. I can't tell you how impressed I was with the amount of work which the team did to put that course on. It was quite incredible. It was a team-taught course. We committed, because it was team-taught, and because we were worried that the students would be getting very different perspectives from the group. Up to a point, that wasn't necessarily a problem. It might have been good for the students, but we certainly didn't want to be flatly contradictory, put it that way. So we committed ourselves to attend each other's lectures. Now, that might sound simple, but it's quite a commitment. And I came across a fat file of notes that I had taken attending lectures by Marjorie, by Rosina Wiltshire, by Rhoda, by Gwen Williams, and others. We really had the energy of youth and the idealism of youth. I can't see myself putting that sort of effort now. It became really a very good course. It became popular. We got some excellent students. The students did very well. The word spread. And the course became Margaret used the metaphor, the womb. The course became the womb of a whole set of other courses, which were in many ways spin-off courses from AR 301, including courses in literature, history, sociology, other disciplines which have been on the books as semester courses for many years now. Some of them are still taught, other ones are coming on. So I want to emphasize the importance of AR 301. It was a pioneering venture, and it really, I think it established women's studies as an important and a credible and a legitimate kind of academic enterprise. I want to emphasize also the mandate of the group was teaching, research, and outreach. For many of us, for most of us, I think, our exposure to the group made us change our research interests, our research perspectives. This was certainly the case with me. When I read things that I wrote, sort of before the 1980s, I realized there was virtually no gender awareness in those works at all. In fact, I am now criticized for the books that I wrote, sort of 79, 81. I am often legitimately criticized that in those books, neither gender nor women really have much of a role at all. So I think for many of us, it forced us to rethink our research priorities, our topics, the questions we ask. And certainly the group did help to stimulate a great deal of research, whether it was research by staff, bibliographical research by our librarian colleagues, postgraduate research, undergraduate research. The number of Caribbean studies which have been done over the last 30 years on gender issues is probably staggering. I'm not saying they're all particularly good, but there is a great deal of stuff in the library. Thankfully, the library has kept every single Caribbean study ever written. The last point I want to make is to take up the point that Rhoda made and Margaret made, and I want to agree with Margaret. The objective of the group, or the primary objective of the group, was always to institutionalize women's studies. We understood that the group was very much an informal, ad hoc kind of organization. And what we wanted was for women's studies to become a permanent, accepted, respected part of the university's operation. And that was achieved with the formation of these centers. Margaret used the metaphor womb. But what I had jotted down here was parent. I saw the group as the parent of the centers. And since, as parents, we want our children to become independent and self-sufficient and so on, I think it was a matter of great pride for us that we played a significant role in the establishment of the centers. Yes, it did. Ultimately, the group's raison d'etre disappeared. But in the same way that parents' raison d'etre disappears when the child becomes, does it ever? Well, you know what I mean. When the child becomes self-supporting and independent, I think we feel the same thing. So I really think, speaking on behalf of all the many, many members of the group over the years, I think we can be very proud in the establishment of the center, and particularly in the fact that the St. Augustine Center is clearly the best of the three centers. And I am not saying that, I am not saying that merely out of campus patriotism. I am saying it advisedly. I have good reasons. I can even document them. I have good reasons for saying that the St. Augustine Center in many ways is probably the leader in the whole enterprise. I think that's a matter of great pride for all of us associated with the group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope that all of you who have stayed have found the panel discussion and the information that you received worthwhile. I certainly appreciated it greatly and would like to thank our panel for the time that they obviously took in preparations. I just want to note that currently at St. Augustine we have about 19 undergraduate courses on the books, and I think at least 5 graduate courses currently scheduled for teaching this year. So AR 301 was a start, but look at where we have reached today. So thank you very much. Our time is very tight. We'd like to finish in 10 minutes if possible. So I'm just asking if there are any questions or comments. We can take about 2. Yes, Joan, yes.
It's been so wonderful to be here this evening, to hear all of that's gone on. And I just want to congratulate the panelists and those who spoke before. I go back such a long way with the Center and the Women's Studies Group, and I'm a little bit of a crossover, having been one of the founding members on the Mona campus way back when. And then, of course, I came here after having been at the Hague with Professor Mohammed, where we did our PhD there, and then coming here to work. But having been something of a sociologist and health sociologist before, I then went over to the Faculty of Medical Sciences. But I just want to say it's been good to go back down the lane with all of the experiences that you spoke of this evening.
Thank you. Valerie? Yes.
Well, this is a very ignorant question, and it just arises from having never been involved with the original group, only having been involved with the Center for Gender and Development Studies. And I'm just wondering, is it that the parent is dead, put out to pasture? Where is the group? I mean, I think for all of us who have been here this evening, we would like to know where the original group is at.
Well, we had a meeting last year. Camille was there, said to ask that question, where is the group? And I think there was no answer. I think nobody really wanted to say that the group was dead. I remember Camille saying the group, will continue. It's part of us, And what did you say, Camille?
I don't know what I said, but I'm saying now it's home. I just think of it. The child,
It's dead.
Yeah.
It's dead. Admit it's dead.
Paula.
Yes, I remember us having this lengthy discussion at the point at which I think I was deputy coordinator with Carmen Redhead. And I upheld then, and I would proudly say now, that the Women and Development Studies Group is an outstanding success. It is, we do not have many in the nation, many examples of this great success, a group that set out to accomplish a purpose, accomplished it splendidly. And if we understand what a purpose is, then we understand when the purpose has been fulfilled, and there should be no regret, no apology at all at saying that it did what it was supposed to do, and it is finished.
We felt, however, that it was necessary to celebrate the group and what it had achieved and to recognize its contribution. And this is what we felt we should do tonight as we mark the 15th anniversary. I said only two, one more.
This is, I think, privilege. I was a member of the very first era of 301. And I want to say thank God for you all. I came across, I remember there were two fellas in the class, and today I noticed in every single class there are at least two guys. And I think just wonderful that, you know, from there, the center grew. And the group is a virtual group, so it can be unhinged anytime. Anyway, thank God for you all, and thank God for the center.
Okay, thank you very much.